My name is Elena Ward. I'm 34 years old, and at 6:12 on a Thursday night, standing in a hospital service corridor with a badge still clipped to my blazer and the smell of stale coffee and antiseptic hanging in the air, I listened to a voicemail that should have shattered me. Instead, it clarified everything. My mother's voice was cold, polished, and controlled, the same voice she used when she wanted to sound righteous in front of strangers. "You're cut off. Don't contact us again. We're moving forward without you." Then she hung up like she was delivering a verdict, not abandoning her own daughter. I stood there staring at the gray cinder block wall while a janitor pushed a cart past me and a code alarm echoed somewhere down the hall. I didn't cry. I didn't call back. I replayed the message once, then twice. I needed to hear the contempt clearly enough to stop lying to myself about what my family had become. They hadn't just pushed me out. They had finally said out loud what they had been practicing for years. I was only useful when I was solving their emergencies. For 6 years, I had quietly untangled their financial disasters, reviewing contracts they didn't read, translating legal documents they didn't understand, and smoothing over debts they insisted were temporary setbacks. My job helped with that. I worked in forensic compliance for hospital foundations, which meant my entire professional life revolved around one thing: following money trails and spotting inconsistencies before they became scandals. My family never respected that work, but they loved what it could do for them. The latest mess involved a luxury downsizing plan my parents had been bragging about for months. They were selling the old family house, buying a lakefront townhouse in a gated community, and telling everyone it was a fresh start. What they didn't say publicly was that the whole plan depended on a fragile chain of paperwork I agreed reluctantly to oversee. Not ownership, not money, just access and verification, the kind of administrative trust families assume you'll never revoke, until the night they told you not to contact them again. At 7:43 the next morning, I sat at my kitchen island with my laptop open and my mother's voicemail echoing in my head. Then I did exactly what a competent professional does when a hostile party severs contact while still depending on their cooperation. I withdrew. I notified the title coordinator that I was no longer verifying source of funds documentation. I informed the broker I revoked authorization to communicate on the transaction. I flagged shared credentials for suspension pending identity verification. Then I sent one final email to the family accountant, explaining that any document previously routed through me would need to be reissued without my review or legal language attached. No yelling, no revenge speech, just lawful withdrawal. The consequences landed faster than I expected. Within an hour, the townhouse closing stalled because the seller refused to proceed with incomplete verification. The contractor renovating my parents' old property paused the move-out schedule after deposit confirmation failed to clear, and the assisted living residence my mother had been courting for my grandmother requested updated payment assurances before reserving the suite she'd been bragging about to friends. That detail made me go still. They were moving Grandma too, and they'd built the entire plan on the assumption would keep stabilizing everything behind the scenes. By noon, the first call came. I let it ring. Then another. Then 6 more. Funny how quickly "don't contact us again" turns into "why aren't you answering" when paperwork stops moving. My father left 2 voicemails before lunch trying to sound calm. "There's been a misunderstanding." 20 minutes later, "You need to call us today." By 3 p.m., his tone had changed to raw panic. "The title company says there's a hold. Elena, I don't know what game you're playing, but this needs to be fixed." I saved the messages and went back to work. That evening, I opened the family group chat. My sister didn't ask what happened. She accused. "How could you do this right before the move? Mom is humiliated." There it was, the familiar logic. Their choices, my fault. Their lies, my responsibility. Then a voicemail transcription arrived from my mother calling me vindictive, unstable, and ungrateful while demanding I fix the paperwork immediately. No apology, no acknowledgement that she told me to stay away, just outrage that I took her at her word. 2 days later, I had 58 missed calls. Not an exaggerated number, exactly 58. Each one marked the speed at which control drained from people who had spent years treating me like a backup generator they could kick when the lights went out. Then a new message appeared on my phone, from a law office. Miss Ward, this is Daniel Harper, representing your parents. We have a serious problem and need to speak tonight. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied with 6 words. Enjoy moving forward. You said that first. And I set the phone down. The next morning, I learned what the serious problem was. My parents had already presented themselves publicly as fully funded for their new lifestyle. They'd promised donors a charity dinner in the not-yet-purchased townhouse. They'd hinted at sponsorship packages and community events. My mother, who sat on an elder care charity committee, had built an entire social narrative around their seamless transition. Except it wasn't seamless. It was brittle. My father carried hidden business debt, my sister had quietly drained a joint emergency line, and the old property required expensive repairs that threatened the sale. The whole structure worked if and only if everything closed perfectly, and if my credibility stayed attached to the paperwork, which it didn't. I told the lawyer I would communicate only in writing. Then I started gathering documentation. The voicemail cutting me off, my withdrawal notices, email timestamps, care facility correspondence, every piece of proof that I had stepped away before their story began collapsing. 3 nights later, the entire situation exploded in public. My mother hadn't canceled the charity reception tied to her fundraising campaign. She'd only moved it to the charity's conservatory. And apparently, she'd been telling donors a new story about the burden of caring for an aging mother while dealing with an estranged daughter who had chosen resentment over responsibility. So I went to the event, not to make a scene, just to hear the story myself. The conservatory was full of glass ceilings, winter greenery, and people pretending empathy over champagne. My mother spotted me immediately. For one perfect second, her smile disappeared. She crossed the room quickly. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "I was curious about the version of me you've been describing." I tried steering her toward a hallway, but people nearby were already watching, so I asked my questions quietly. Had the care facility been told the deposit depended on a closing that hadn't happened? Did the property seller know about the structural repairs? Why had my sister told people I was still handling compliance after I withdrew in writing? The room went very still. A trustee finally asked the only question that mattered. "Miss Ward, were you involved in this transition?" "Not after my mother told me not to contact them again," I said calmly. "I have the documentation if anyone needs clarity." My mother went pale. Within minutes, the board chair pulled her aside. Someone from legal started whispering with the event coordinator. I left before the spectacle grew uglier. Near the coat check, the lawyer intercepted me. "Can we resolve this quietly?" he asked. Quietly is a favorite word of people who mean before consequences become permanent. I'm not interested in spectacle. I'm only interested in accuracy. Then I went home. The fallout lasted 6 weeks. The old house sale collapsed after deeper disclosures revealed expensive repairs. The lakefront townhouse sold to another buyer. The assisted living residents withdrew their reservation after inconsistent financial statements triggered internal review. My mother stepped down from her charity committee. My sister's carefully curated lifestyle cracked when the drained credit lines surfaced. And my father, who had spent years floating above consequences, ended up taking consulting work he once mocked. As for my grandmother, I refused to let her become collateral damage. Through a social worker, I arranged a modest, reputable placement for her, completely separate from my parents' finances. Safe care, honest numbers, nothing performative. When my mother found out, she accused me of humiliating her by downgrading Grandma's future. That word told me everything. To her, care was always about appearances, not people. Months later, I signed the closing papers on my own condo. No family group chat, no dramatic reconciliation, just a quiet room, a clean title, and a pen in my hand. Some people think revenge means shouting or public humiliation. Sometimes it's simpler. Sometimes it's documentation, boundaries, and refusing to keep your enemies warm just because they share your last name. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people experience the full weight of a life they built on top of your unpaid loyalty.